Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Odd childhood memories. When I was 11 and poor, I lived in a trailer park. The place is a pretty normal community. Standard pill pushers, retirees addicted to oxy. A couple of the trailers aren't even being rented out anymore. One in particular sits at the front, an odd, gaudy trailer with orange trim. The place has been empty for so long, nobody even remembers anyone ever living in it. It was there before the retirees were. Everyone in the neighborhood stays away, even the kids. I never understand why. Get ballsy and decide to take a look. The ground around the trailer is covered in Hot Wheels. I count about 12. In the yard, I found this 5-pound geode, filled with orange-brownish crystals. Swing around out back. The entire section of the backyard is covered in pennies, primarily situated underneath the trailer's laundry vent. Take every last one. All told, $7.34. I have to use my oversized shirt as a basket to carry them all, plus a couple Hot Wheels and the geode. I go home to drop it all off, run over to my mate's house with a jar of pennies, tell him to grab his shit, tell his little brother and sister, and move. His family's on welfare, and my mom was probably some form of working girl in retrospect. We were poor-ass kids. Snacks were a rare treat. Suddenly have almost $10 between the four of us to have a field day with. We run across the highway to our local grocer, buy as many snacks as we can carry, tell my best mate about the trailer, how there were pennies all around it. Doesn't believe me? I'll fucking show him. It takes a second to convince him, but we head out eventually. Swing out around back to show him where the pennies were. The ground is littered with pennies again. Weathered, old pennies. Looked like they'd been there for years. He believes me, but that's the thing. I had taken every last one from that backyard. It's pretty hard to miss a penny, especially on concrete. All told, we found $4.12. Pick related, it's the trailer.
Be 6 turning 7 in a couple days. Beg my mom and dad every year to come eat lunch with me at school every time my birthday comes around. Irrelevant, but I was always a shy, loner kid, still am. Never wanted to sit at the lunch table at school. Too many people near me made me feel cloudy. My parents are, in retrospect, stressed, possibly because my father had lost his job, and they had been fighting recently. They tell me that they aren't going to be able to eat lunch with me. Be a tiny bit upset with this fact, but I'm a passive person, so I just say okay. The day of, I try to ply my parents with acting as if my stomach is upset. I do this frequently, they are wise to it. They send my ass to school. Come lunchtime, I am dreading having to do the happy birthday song. I was in multi-age learning, so they had the entire class block thing sing happy birthday to the lucky SOB. I walk out to the playground after lunch. It's my dad. My father is a big guy for you. He was 6'7", a ginger that wore Coke bottle glasses, had a big red mustache, and dressed tackier than hell. My mother dressed him. He is standing straight, obviously looking for me, on top of a wooden barricade that separates the blacktop for the basketball courts and the ground gravel of the playground. I run over to him. Dad, what are you doing here? My memory gets pretty fuzzy from here. He tells me something along the lines of, I didn't want you to be upset. Surprised, and happy that he is here, I grab him by the hand. Me and him walk along the fence line separating the playground and the parking lot of the school. In retrospect, we had walked pretty far away from the playground, more towards the beginning of the forest. Talking about nothing in particular, or at least nothing I can remember very clearly. Recess is coming to an end, I can feel it. My dad stops very abruptly. He turns to me and kneels down. He said something to me, he looked very serious. Grabs me by the shoulders firmly. Turns me around and gives me a little shove. Not aggressive, just a little nudge, back toward the playground. When I am turned, I see my teacher, Ms. Rosa, looking bewildered. She fans her hand toward herself, calling me back in. Apparently recess had already ended, and I was late. I turn around to say goodbye to my dad. Nobody. Couldn't even see him walking away. Think to myself as a kid, I guess he just left, and shrug it off. I get back into my class. A few kids chuckle as I was led, in hand, by Ms. Rosa, angrily, while the teacher's aide was minding the kids. A class period later, I was called to the front office. My sister is waiting there for me. Weird, my sister usually doesn't pick me up. She looks pretty upset, and tells me that we are going home. I ask why, and she doesn't answer me. When we are about halfway home, she tells me that mom is going to be really upset, and crying, and she tells me that I should probably just go to my room, and be quiet. When we get home, I am led to my room by my sister, and I sneak a glance inside my parents' room to see my mother sat at the end of the bed, and beside her our chatty neighbor. My mother is loudly crying. A little bit worried, I asked my sister what happened. My father had passed away that morning. He had been lying prone on the bed, applying for jobs on his little crappy laptop. My father apparently had a massive heart attack, and died quickly, face planted into his laptop. My mother had been doing the laundry, and making breakfast for the both of them, after seeing me off to school. He had been dead for a little while before she discovered him, I believe. By the time the paramedics came it was too late. I remember getting upset, and telling my sister that I had just seen him, at lunchtime. My sister and I got into an argument at this point. I try to explain that he was probably still at school. My sister ends up using the old coat hanger to lock me in my room. My memories of this day end here. I am not receptive to the idea of death. I am a little bit of an artist, so I don't quite grasp the finality of it. Don't quite understand it until a year or two later, not quite sure. Irrelevant, but I remember being a shitty selfish kid, and asking about my birthday the next day to my sister. Yells in my face, and the old coat hanger locks me in my room again. I developed this strange habit of finding random objects that I thought my brother, sister, and mother would like, wrapping them in writing paper, and leaving them in front of their doors. Back on point. A number of years later, I had forgotten entirely about this. My sister and I are getting breakfast to catch up. She has kids now. Without reference to anything, she asks me,
"Hey, you remember when I picked you up from school when Dad died?
"Yeah, why?"
You said that you had seen him on the playground before I picked you up."
Start losing my shit. I hadn't thought about that in a decade. The entire thing hits me all at once. As an adult, I start losing control of my emotions. Start trying to explain the event to my sister. Have to compose myself every other sentence, so as to not embarrass myself in front of the fine denizens of the Waffle House. It's been 5 years since she brought those memories back to me. I try not to think about it, as I can only move forward. Whenever I find myself thinking about it, I am desperately trying to remember what my dad had said to me that day, when he had grabbed me by my shoulders. Wish every day that I didn't have to think about it. I am unsure about how to feel about it. The more I dwell on that memory, the more I feel like my current day environment corrupts my recollection of it. I, for damn sure, do not try to discuss it with anyone, except for anonymous basket weaving enthusiasts. I would have rather my sister not brought it back up to me. I have never been a believer in the paranormal, more of an avid hoper of it. But this memory caused me some inner turmoil with my beliefs. Whether my father had visited me post-mortem, or I had just made it up that day, I can never remember. However, I really wish I could recall what he had told me that day.
My mother used to tell me that when an important person in your life passes, they will return physically temporarily to say goodbye. She's had similar experiences to you.
This is unrelated to the thread. Not a childhood experience by any means, but relevant to your story. Be me. I am 42 years old. This happened back in March 2020. Dad just got a cancer diagnosis 3 weeks ago. My parents live 200 miles away. Go to stay with them for a while to help out. Dad is in a wheelchair, mom old and frail. Drive them places. Run errands, stuff you'd expect. Take them to the hospital so Dad can get first try at radiotherapy. Hospital is 100 miles from their house. Countryfolk.jpg. Get Dad checked in. Take Mum home. Today was machine calibration. Tomorrow is actual therapy. Tomorrow, Mum phones Dad in hospital. Slurring and confused sounding. Worries. Phones ward and asks nurse if he's okay.
Doctor's with him now. I'll call you back when he's done.
Fuck it. Let's ride. I start driving the 100 miles to the hospital. About half an hour away. Suddenly I get this feeling of overwhelming sadness, and start crying inexplicably. Look at Mum, she's teary too. I drive faster. We get to ward. Be ushered into a little quiet room. Wait about 5-ish minutes for the doctor. The doctor comes in.
Sorry, he passed away suddenly.
WTF? Why?
Cancer caused his lungs to flare up, swell, crushed his heart, nothing we could do.
When? The doctor looks at the watch.
40 minutes ago.
Right at the moment the two of us got the overwhelming sadness and started crying out of nowhere. Bear in mind the cancer was bad. But they caught it early. We knew he was done for, but not any time soon. Figured he had at least a few years left. We had no reason to think he'd die that day. We were thinking they'd given him some weird meds or something. Up until that moment we'd been chatting normally. As jovially as possible when your husband just got a cancer diagnosis. The exact fucking moment he died, we both knew somehow.
I have one. Be 11 or 12, young but old enough that the memories are pretty clear. Be camping on my family's property. It's not huge but has a decent-sized patch of trees surrounded by a fence. Like to make fires and sleep in my hammock out there in the summer. Put out my fire, dousing it with a 5-gallon bucket of water. Get into the hammock and fall asleep. Wake up later, not sure how much time has passed. A fire is roaring in my fire pit. The fire seems big, but it has a red color and does not emit much light. Almost like a flare. A man. I can't see him well because he's squatting a good yard or two from the fire. He's wrapped in a blanket and he looks like an old man. Nothing overtly terrifying about the old man, but the feeling of dread and evil was overpowering. Run into my house screaming. Dad runs out with a revolver, comes back a minute later, says he doesn't see anyone. Ask him about the fire. Cold, not even coals. People always chalk it up to a dream, but I never clearly woke up from anything. I only saw something after I woke up. The other excuse is that it's a homeless guy, but with the strange fire and the fact that it went out with no evidence, as well as the strong feeling of evil that I have never felt even in scary non-paranormal experiences. I believe it was a spirit of some kind that could control what I saw.
This happened a long time ago, so the house is remodeled now, but it used to be run down in every aspect. 9 years old. I live next to Pick related. Neighbors always had a loud ass saw going in the house. Never knew what they were doing. Would just hear a saw going off every day. One day get curious. Decide to walk to the house. Fence hadn't been erected yet, so our properties were connected. Reach the back of the house but no sign of a saw. Noise has gotten louder though. Get closer and reach the other side of the house. Saw is blaring in my ears, but is nowhere in sight. By the way it sounded, it should have been right in front of me. Get confused, scared, and run off. Fast forward 10 to 11 years. Moved out a long time ago. Talking to my dad about experiences. Mentioned the house and the saw.
Anon. No one was living in that house while we lived there.
But the saw.
The last guy living there died in that house. I even talked to the cops who had come to investigate the scene. No one moved in afterwards.
Turns out the last tenant had essentially isolated himself inside the house and rotted away before anyone found him. Assumed to be a self-end. Happened just before we moved there. No one moved in after that. No one could have been operating a saw in that house. That house had a lot of strange shit going on. My mom took a surprisingly well-kept encapsulated dried rose from a trash heap right by it because she thought it looked nice. I couldn't go anywhere near it because the damn thing would give me a headache the closer I'd get to it.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember that all videos have been archived on the Odyssey page.